Okay, now you
There you
can
go.
hear me, right?
I can hear you now. Yeah. Thank you for joining us, Alan. How are you this morning? Or I guess it's not
Okay.
even, is it morning where you are?
Yeah, it's 11 in the morning.
Okay. Where are you based out of? Where do you
I'm
live?
in New York City.
Oh, you're still there.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
born and raised, like straight up, you're still there. Like, dude, you've been there your whole
Fifth,
life then.
fifth generation New Yorker.
Oh, that's incredible. And
But
and and like, I guess we'll get right into it. Like you've been on Broadway. Like you were on Broadway as a little kid. Now, is that the story that I read where you kind of like volunteered as an audience member? Like, is that
correct.
how you
That's
got
it.
into stage acting?
That's it. That's it.
Wow.
I think, I think you ask yourself all the time in this business that I'm in, why you do it. And I think at 8, somehow that the excitement of having people react and laugh was exhilarating. And I guess that's really what it still is now. It's just fun to hear people react and I guess make them laugh
Hmm.
or cry, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Like any emotion, I suppose, right? And
Yeah.
so, like, what was it that you were watching around that time, and like, what was
So it was a
influencing you to?
magic show actually,
Oh,
and they asked. We went to school, a school class, and we were in the auditorium, and they asked for volunteers, and so I volunteered, and they took me on the stage, and they took me backstage. This was in the 50s, and they said, "We're going to put something on your face, and when we put you on the stage, we're going to turn out the lights, and you're going to see the reaction." Well, at the time, I mean, again, this was in the 50s, so they put I guess paint and they had a black light, which was
sure.
a brand new thing then, right? So they turned the lights out, they turned the black light on, and I had all these squiggles, I guess, on my face. And all these, 6, 7, 8-year-old kids were like, ah, ah. And so that was what I did.
That's
But I
incredible.
just
And
knew
so,
I liked being up there. That was the
of
thing.
course, like you feel that in your soul almost,
That's
as
right.
easy as that sounds, right? And
That's
so,
right.
tell us about getting a role in the Three Musketeers. Like in the same, still, you're still super young at that point.
Yeah. So I came home and I told my mother that I enjoyed it. And so she enrolled me in a group in New York called the Children's Professional Acting Guild. And I guess this was 1958. And there was a production going on of the Three Musketeers. And so they called the woman that was leading this children's acting group and asked if she had a couple of kids that she could send to be in it. And I was one of them. Didn't have a speaking part, but I was on Broadway.
At 9.
Yeah, yeah,
So you've covered what, 7 decades? You've done something on Broadway.
correct,
Is it like
correct.
your whole life? I know you
Right.
did. You drove some taxi and you went
Yeah,
and taught English in Paris, and which is super cool. Like, what a
yeah,
cool life experience
yeah,
to have.
yeah.
How old were you for that, by the way?
So when I graduated college, and I majored in French and theater in college. And so when I was 22-ish, 23, I had to make a decision what I wanted to do.
Hmm.
And the politics weren't the greatest in America at the time. So I decided to go to France. And I went to France, and that's when I lived there for 10 years and started and taught English there, started a business. And after 10 years, I came back. And I
Wow.
dabbled in theater and film there. Didn't do a lot, but I did some.
Yeah, yeah. And didn't you meet your husband there as well?
I did. I
Like,
did.
imagine not going there and how
Yeah.
different your life
Yeah.
would be
Yeah.
today,
Yeah.
right?
In fact, I was 23. I was teaching English, and he was 17 and a half,
Oh,
and he was my student. And
no, really?
yeah, and so we met, and that was 50 years ago, and we're still together.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And what does he do?
So we started a business together in France. We brought it to America,
Hmm.
and we still own that business. We have retail stores throughout New York City. We're in the gift industry.
Hmm.
So names of the stores are PIQ. We have one in Grand Central Terminal. We have one in Rockefeller Center, one in Hudson Yards. So he still is somewhat involved in that. But we have
Wow.
a great staff now,
Yeah,
and they're really pretty much running the show.
that's great. And what I'm curious, like, what were you watching as a kid, and like, what influenced you to go down this path?
Um, I guess, this was the 50s, and I'm thinking of watching Howdy Doody. I know my grandmother took me to a taping of, well, I guess it was live then. It was a taping of Howdy Doody,
Mhm.
and I was in the kids' audience. I remember Clarabelle squirting seltzer at me. Um, but I think probably my grandmother loved theater. And so when I was 8, she started taking me to Broadway plays. And I remember the first one I saw was Sound of Music with Mary Martin. I saw Bye Bye Birdie with Chita Rivera. And I think what I loved about it, and what I still love when I'm on stage, is the excitement and the camaraderie that the actors have together. And I remember my favorite part was always the curtain calls, because that's when you could see how the actors were so enthusiastic about what they did. And I think that kind of inspired me and excited me about that industry. And even now I see, because right now I'm in a play off Broadway, and I see that the the relationship between the actors is thrilling. It's thrilling.
Hmm. So it's different than screen acting in that
Yeah,
regard. Obviously, it's different in screen acting for the acting
yeah,
part and the actual,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
creation part. But like,
yeah.
is it different in the relationship part?
Yeah, yes, because I think what happens when you're on stage, first of all, you're going on a journey. You
Yeah,
start at the beginning of the play, you go to the end, and you're going on that journey together.
yeah,
But when you're doing a film, it's so discombobulated because you don't start at the beginning and end at the end. You're all different places. And often you can be in a film and you don't even work with with most of the actors in the film. You're just doing
right.
your scenes. So you don't really get that feel of from beginning to end.
Until you watch it in the theater and you're like, wow, that
Yeah,
was really well put together.
that's right. You're like, oh, they were in that? Oh, yeah, that's right. We were in it
Totally right.
together.
That's awesome. How old were you for your first paying role?
My first pain role, I think it was about 10 years old. There was public TV in New York. They were doing The Lottery by Shirley Jackson,
Okay.
and they hired me to play one of the kids, one of the townspeople. That was
Mm,
the first time I got paid for that.
that's pretty fun, hey? And do you think it's imperative for someone to have a manager?
Well, it's a good question because I don't have a manager now.
Oh,
I had a manager for many years. She died during COVID, and she was helpful to me. And now I'm looking for a manager. So
oh,
I've been doing, since COVID, I've been doing an enormous amount of work, but I still would rather have a manager. It's
yeah,
not easy to find a manager, especially at a certain age. I've spoken to a number of people, and if you're young in your 20s and you're starting a career, they want you because they're going to grow your career. And if you're very well known, they want you because it's an automatic income. But when you're kind of older and not famous, it's not so easy. So I am looking for a manager.
mm,
So the question is, I think it's not essential because I'm in an off-Broadway play now,
yeah,
so it's not essential, but it's something that I think I know I need and want.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, let's talk about that off-Broadway play. It's called Party
It's called Party.
with the question mark. I'm not saying it like being a smartass. It's actually
Yeah.
called
The
Party.
party. It's like
Uh,
party.
how Party? How good does that feel to be back and on stage and in front of people? Like, it must be so fulfilling, hey?
Yeah, I love doing it. Again, I love it's just, it's so, you see award shows and someone will get up and say, "Oh, we're a family and I want to thank the actors that I'm working with." And you sit there and go, yeah, this is so trite.
Yeah,
But when you're actually doing it, it
it's true.
really is that. It really is true because you count on each other so much. If someone forgets a line or skips a line, you
Mhm.
all look at each other. You all know. You can't let the audience know.
Sure,
So
yeah.
you're all working together constantly. So it's great. The play is really good. We're getting fabulous response from the audience. It's wonderful. I love it. I love every minute of it.
It must be something when you have to act on your feet like that real quick when, like you say, somebody forgets a line or they just skip over a line, you're like, "Oh shit, here we go."
Yeah.
Like, now we've
And
gotta kinda
especially someone,
improv at improv almost.
well, someone will skip a line and they might fast forward 2 pages, and then you're all looking at each other and you're like,
How do
okay,
we
how do we get back 2 pages without letting anyone else know we're doing it? So all of you, like we're six and we'll be six on stage. And again, it's that look that we give each other and we're like, uh-oh, we're in trouble. But
Yeah,
we
yeah,
all know, and we all know we have to get out of it, and we all kind of help and figure out a way to do it. It's
yeah.
it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah, and of course, you've gotta be super, super happy about the success of, The Cold, Dead Look in Your Eyes. Like, holy crap, did that thing just
Mhm.
plow through wins? Like,
Yeah,
13 wins,
yeah,
14 nominations, like,
yeah,
when you're
yeah.
creating something like that, Alan,
Mhm.
can you tell, like, that it will be critically acclaimed, that people will love the what you're working on?
Um, I guess when I read the script, I saw there were some scenes that for me would be important.
Yeah,
And I think that's what actors will do when they choose to take a role or not. I certainly know I do it. If I'm offered a role and I read the script and it's just like a flatline role for me, it's not interesting for me to do it particularly. I wanted to have some meat.
right.
And so with that cold dead look in your eyes, originally my role was supposed to be for a woman. And
Oh,
when I auditioned for another role, the director kind of saw me in that woman's role and then changed it to a man. And so
right.
when he asked me to do it, I felt that it was a good role for me. And so I wouldn't say that I knew I would win the awards I won, but I knew that it was a good role.
Yeah. Yeah, really interesting. Like, I haven't seen the movie itself, but I went
Mhm,
to, the Sizzle page and
mhm,
watched the
mhm,
trailer and, read the
mhm,
synopsis and all that.
mhm.
Really forward-thinking, movie. Like, really like, I wanna watch the movie now that I've seen the
Yeah,
trailer.
yeah.
It
He
looks super engaging.
he's a very talented writer, director, owner to Cal,
Yeah.
and he's done a lot of work. And I wish he had more recognition because he's very good.
Well,
He's
I
very,
would think that this would push him into the recognition role, like, there's a
yeah,
spotlight, so now, like,
yeah,
attack.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We hope so.
Yeah, for sure. And what was the last movie that you saw in a theater?
So I'm a member of the Hamptons Film Festival. I
Okay.
am one of their founders, and so I go to the festival. So I've seen a lot that they did, and probably the last one, I guess, there I saw Maestro.
Okay. Okay. And what are you binge watching lately? Like the
Um,
shows you just
well,
can't get
well,
enough of.
well, frankly, I got cast in this play the end of December.
Mm,
At every spare moment, it's line memorization, working on the lines. So since January, I haven't even turned on the television.
wow.
I think that's what happens. I talk about this with the other actors. When you're working on a project and it's a lot of memorization, that's really all you could think about. And if I sit down to watch TV to get distracted, I'm like, No, I have to work on these lines.
Yeah,
So I
interesting
haven't
to
watched anything since January.
yeah, yeah, and like, you know, like, I don't want to call you a content creator, but like ultimately what you do is you create things for people. So it's interesting to get that take that, you know, you almost become too busy in your world creating things for people that you can't even enjoy what other people have created for you.
Well,
It's
yeah,
an
and also I
interesting,
think what happens is that you start to live the character
yeah,
and you start to react as the character would react, and it becomes all encompassing. You know, I don't walk around and talk to people like my character, but I'll go to the supermarket and I'll think, what would he eat? You know, or is this the food he would want? Because
mhm,
the thing I love about acting, I think one of the things I love most is I really, it sounds trite, but I really enjoy people. So I enjoy getting into someone's skin to kind of understand them more. And
mhm.
it does, it becomes obsessive. And on the other hand, the minute the show ends or the film ends, it's like gone. I might not even remember the lines anymore the next day. It just leaves.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think that that's super odd in your world though. Like I've heard of some actors literally the whole time that they're on set, they do respond, they do reply as
Mhm.
character. Don't address me as my real name. Like,
Yeah,
and I guess that,
yeah,
I mean, that makes sense, right? If you're trying to
yeah,
be a character, stay in
yeah.
character.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
different actors have different techniques for it, you
yeah,
know, whatever works for them. The woman that plays my wife in this play, she is like that. You know, it's hard sometimes to talk to her about anything other than what my character would say
right,
when we're together.
right. Yeah,
And
fair enough.
she's fabulous.
Yeah. Alan, outside of acting, I'd love to kind of pick your brain about other parts of your life, if that's cool for a bit.
Hmm.
Are you a big sports person? Like, do you watch? Like, who's your team if you're watching? No,
I'm not a sports person.
no.
I swim. I love swimming, but
Okay,
my big thing is traveling. I just going to the theater and traveling. I love traveling. I travel all over the world, and I have, and looking forward to traveling more.
yeah,
So traveling is where I spend my time.
yeah. It's, and money too, right? Like for me as well. Like
Mhm.
music and travel for me are the
Mhm.
two things that I really don't care what it costs. Like
Right.
unless it's like so extravagant, like
Yeah.
that I couldn't
Yeah.
possibly afford it.
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
where are your like say your top three favorite places you've been to then?
I guess I think the most exciting place and the place that has the most influence on my life probably is when I go to Botswana or some animal safari, not for hunting, but
Yeah,
just looking, because
enjoying.
you sit there and you watch these elephants, for example, cross in front of you, and you think they've been doing this for hundreds of thousands of years. And in fact, the same path, the same watering hole, and you realize how minute you are and how yet you have to savor every minute that you're here because we're here for such a short time. So it puts when I'm in that type of environment, it puts life in perspective for me.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
think that would be my absolute favorite place to go. And I love that. I also love, I go to India often and go on Ayurvedic cure for 3 weeks,
mm,
which is an old kind of way of dealing with your body and food. That's very spiritual, although I'm not particularly spiritual, but it's a very nice, calming thing. And then how do you not like France or Italy or
any of
England?
those
You know?
places. I mean, it's
Yeah,
incredible, right? I've
yeah.
only been once over to that part of the world, and
Mhm.
like I could have just stayed there my whole life, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
just so
And
good.
I think what you said about spending money, I think that of all the things I've spent money on in my life, the only expense I don't regret at all is anything I've ever spent on travel.
Sure.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. Are you a good cook? Like
That's
if you have
also one of
people
my
over,
hobbies. That's
y-
one
y-
of my big hobbies.
yeah,
I love,
I kind of felt that that was going to be a yes from you. Same for me. I love cooking. It's, for whatever
yeah,
reason, it really relaxes me. But
me too.
so when you have friends over, like if you have
Mm.
dinner guests and stuff, like what are
Mhm.
you and your husband setting up? Like what's the night? What are you cooking to impress?
So I love to cook, and I think what makes me a good cook is not the quality of the food I make, but the fact that I can make a dinner for many people and don't get nervous about it. So every year I do a July 14th party where I live, and this year I cooked for 85 people. In 10 days,
85.
I'm having people over from the Hamptons Film Festival. There's going to be 40 people, and I'm going to make dinner for 40 people. So it's not necessarily what I make, it's just that I make something and it seems to come out good and people enjoy it. I love champagne, so it's kind of my weakness.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Crack a bottle, away we
yeah,
go.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that's a
No,
big weakness of mine.
well,
I love
you're
desserts. I love making, I love. And often when I know when I'm going to make dinner for people, in my mind, I'll start with what dessert I'm going to make, and then I'll
it
work
went
backwards
backward.
from the dessert.
Interesting. Well, you're blowing my mind. I was expecting like, you're cooking for, five, six, eight people, not 40, 80.
Mm. Yeah.
That's a massive thing to chew off. I couldn't even,
And I have Passover Seder every year, and I have 30 people for the Seder, and I make the gefilte fish that my grandmother made, and
wow.
matzo balls and all that, and I just chop liver. I enjoy doing it. I really
Yeah.
do enjoy doing
Oh, that's great. Um, hit us with the music that has been through your life. Like start as a kid. What was the music in your house? And what would you put on for a dinner party?
My mother adored, the American standards.
Yeah.
So, and she had many 78s, and so that's what we would listen to growing up. And then when I went to college, that was in the LSD days. So I guess anything related to that, I did have long hair. I was a hippie. Jimi Hendrix and Blood, Sweat, and Tears and Janis Joplin,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, all of that. And
Woodstock.
then now I go back to my mother's favorites. I'm a big Frank Sinatra, and I love Broadway musicals. So I think the Broadway musical is probably, since the first time seeing Sound of Music with my grandmother to now, that's probably the most constant thread in my musical life.
Hmm. Hmm.
And there's
Well,
something about gay men liking Broadway musicals. I don't
yeah,
know.
no doubt. I'm not going to touch that. There must be something about those, like those old, those, the standards that it must feel like comfort music for you.
Yeah, it's kind of like eating meatloaf, right? If you
Yeah.
listen to Frank Sinatra, it just makes you feel. And I wonder what a 20-year-old today, what their comfort music will be when they're in their 60s or 70s.
Right. It couldn't possibly be Taylor Swift, could it? Or Drake?
Well,
Or
yeah,
maybe it is. Maybe
maybe
it
it
is.
is. Maybe it is. Yeah.
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 Because for me, my comfort music is the stuff that my mom listened to.
Which was what?
Uh, ABBA,
Uh-huh.
Steve Miller Band,
Uh-huh.
the Eagles,
Yeah.
some Zeppelin,
Yeah.
stuff like that. Little River Band,
Hmm.
Dolly Parton, Kenny Rogers, stuff
Oh,
like that.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which, of course, it's not something I put on and like, oh, I can't wait to hear the ABBA Voulez-Vous album. But if it's on, I
Yep.
know every
Makes you feel
word in
good.
it, and it
Yeah.
makes me feel good.
Yeah. Makes you
It's
feel
weird.
good.
Yeah.
That's right.
And what was the first concert you went to?
First concert that I ever went to. Um, the first concert probably was in college, probably was in college, and it would have been Peter, Paul, and Mary.
Mm.
Or no, I think it was probably Barbara Streisand in Central Park.
Mm, mm.
I think it was before, yeah, I think it was Barbara Streisand in Central Park.
Was she a singer before
She did.
acting?
She played in Greenwich Village. That's where she got her start. And then they put her in a show. I think it was I Can't Get It For You Wholesale. And then from there they put her in Funny Girl.
Mm. 'Cause I read something the other day and it blew my mind. Did you know that Barbara Streisand is in the top 20 of the most records sold in the United States?
Wow. Yeah,
Like,
because her beginning career, she was a singer and she sold lots of records. Lots of records.
yeah, like up there with like Garth Brooks and
Uh,
AC/DC and Fleetwood
uh,
Mac and Michael
uh,
Jackson and
uh,
like what?
and she's really talented. I mean,
Yeah,
she's really talented.
yeah, yeah. Uh, it's super oddball question, Alan. If you want to skip it, you can. Do you believe aliens have visited us?
Absolutely. I think that people that, and I think anyone that would give a categoric no to that is an idiot.
Mm,
Because how could you not how could you not believe that something else exists out there? You can be doubtful, you can say, I want the proof, but how could you not believe that there's something else going on? Or how could you be so closed-minded to say, no, I don't believe it? So, of course I do.
yeah. Visited, maybe live among us?
Well, when I was about 12 years old, I was out walking the dog and I looked up and I saw what you would think would be a flying saucer. And I went home and I called the radio station and they told me that there were hundreds of people in my neighborhood that had called saying the same thing.
Wow.
Now, what was it? I don't know. This was a long time ago. But the more you research, the more you hear, and the more you listen to people testifying to
Sure.
Congress and everything, the more you hear people saying, knowledgeable people saying that there are recorded incidents. So yeah, I why not? Why wouldn't it be? Why wouldn't that be possible?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I talked to a guy in a band called Gob. It was the drummer in
Mhm,
the band. And I asked the question. He's like, "Oh my god, I can't believe you're asking this question." Like, yeah, I believe that not only have they visited, but the same thing
mhm,
he saw, in between towns. He's driving in the van, and they stopped because they saw something. They went had to pee, but
mhm,
they saw something in the sky, and they
mhm,
were compelled to walk toward it. And then it
mhm,
started coming to them, and then he said he
mhm,
just felt such an overwhelming fear and, like, they couldn't move, and, like,
mhm.
hair on their arms were standing up, and he's
Yeah,
like, "And why would I say shit like that? Like,
that's right.
this makes you
That's right.
sound crazy."
That's right. That's
But
right.
it happened to me,
Of course. Of
like,
course. Uh, I believe in all that. I believe in, spirit, the soul of a person being present, things coming back. This is just since you asked, and I'll tell you, my mother had a favorite song, and it's a song that's not the most popular song. It's not one that we would sing, but she had this favorite song. So I'm at the theater that a couple of weeks ago when we started the show, and the director had put together 5 or 6 songs to play as the audience is coming in.
mhm,
And I'm sitting backstage waiting, and there's this song, my mother's favorite song. Now, she didn't know me, the director didn't know me, clearly didn't know my mother,
mhm,
clearly would have never known what my mother's favorite song was. And there are what, 2 million songs she could have chosen to play? She chose that one. And so now
yeah,
every night before I go on stage, I hear this song playing, which is my mother's favorite song. So how could I not say that somewhere my
something.
mother said, I'm here?
Yeah. Wow, what a trip, hey?
Yeah,
So cool.
yeah.
All right. I told you I'd be maybe 20 minutes. We're into half hour here, so I'll wrap it up. I'll give two more questions, and
Okay.
I'll let you go here.
Mhm.
It's not a question. It's more of a, do you have a near death story where you're like, holy shit, I could have just died there?
Well, that's a good question because I do. I was on a trip in Africa and I got um, like a bad. I had appendicitis. I had my appendix out 6 months earlier,
Mm.
and sometimes you get strictures where it rotates. So I didn't know what it was, and I got this, and I was really, really, really sick. All of a sudden, they rushed me to the hospital, and the care in the place I wasn't necessarily what it could or should have been in other places in the world. So I was in the hospital bed, and I was dying, and I literally saw my body come out, and I watched me from the top of the room looking down. And about 10 minutes, or to me it was 10, but maybe it was an hour or whatever, a friend who I was with came and said, "We just chartered a plane to get you to New York." And they did. And the doctor, when I got to the New York hospital, they said, if you had been there another 3 or 4 hours, you were dead. So that was a near death experience. I saw it. I saw my life in front of me. I saw me lying there dead.
Dude,
So,
that's
so,
crazy.
so you asked the question. I had an answer for you.
Wow. Wow. All right. This could be the easiest, it could be the toughest. Can you pick just one career highlight?
Um, yes, yes. I was in when I got my Screen Actors Guild card because auditioned and got a role in Knots Landing.
Okay,
And they
nice.
flew me to LA, and it was on the Warner Brothers lot. And I was waiting to be called. And I was, I guess 30-ish. And the emotion, the excitement was beyond. But while I was waiting, someone said to me, "Oh, you want to go and look at the costume wing of Warner Brothers?"
Yeah.
And they took me in there, and the head of costumes walked me through every single costume that had ever been in any movie, whether it be Sound of Music or Gone with the Wind, or and I just started crying. I just started crying.
Sure.
It wasn't performing, but it was so it was such a highlight. I'll never forget that. I'm
Yeah.
sure I could think of others, but that one comes to my mind right away.
But I like it, and how cool, because that's like something that most people wouldn't have,
Yeah,
to
yeah,
walk through and see all
yeah,
these things and all these
yeah,
clothes and all the everything that, your mind remembers and knows and loves, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
totally understand why you would cry
yeah,
doing
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Crazy.
yeah.
Well, congrats on the success of Party.
Thank you.
And thank you again for jumping on the podcast here in
Well,
Vancouver, Alan.
thank you for
You're
doing
Alan
it.
Ceppos on Instagram. Are you on Twitter? Are you on TikTok? Do you have any
Not
other?
just Instagram, Facebook, and I have a website.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again for doing this, and
Okay.
I'll tag you when we're throwing this stuff around online. Have a
Okay.
great day, and great
Okay.
to
Thank
talk.
you. Same to you.